Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to the new Frontier Data webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about opportunities with cannabinoid-based beauty and skincare. My name is Dr. Amanda Ryman. I am the Chief Knowledge Officer of New Frontier Data. New Frontier Data is a technology and insights company serving the legal cannabis industry in the US and abroad. And we're all about helping you discover who are your consumers, how do you get those consumers, and to bring data and actionable insights to the cannabis industry. So I'm so pleased that you're joining us today. We have a really exciting webinar planned. We have some amazing guests. So I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what will be covered today. So I'm joined by Karen and Rob from Purissima. Karen, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. I'm Karen Raghavan, VP of Brand Development at Purissima. And I joined Purissima about 1.5 years ago. And my experience is really through beauty and wellness. I spent over 20 years in the beauty and wellness industry before joining Purissima. So really happy to be able to talk about the intersection of biotech, cannabinoids, and beauty today with you all.
Great. Thank you so much. Rob?
It's great to be here. Excited to be talking about this subject with everybody. I'm Rob Evans. I'm co-founder, chief business officer at Purissima, a company that we started a little over 5 years ago. And bringing these ingredients to the market at this point is a really exciting milestone for us. And their application in beauty is something that we're incredibly excited about, and really excited to be talking about this subject today.
Great. Well, we're so glad to have both of you here. We're going to dive into some really interesting and I think not very talked about aspects of the cannabis beauty market. But first, I want to tell our folks a little bit about the data that we based our report and our webinar on today, and then a little bit of housekeeping. And then we're going to have a poll to kick things off so we can find out a little bit more about who you are and if you've used cannabinoid-based skincare. So today's webinar is based off of the consumer survey that is done every year by New Frontier Data. This is a survey of over 4,000 cannabis consumers in the United States. It is a nationally representative sample based off the US Census. And we ask consumers a myriad of questions about who they are, their cannabis using behaviors, consuming behaviors, purchasing behaviors, preferred products, public health and fitness practices. It really runs the gamut. And one of the things that we dove a little bit deeper into with the last survey was cannabinoid-based skincare, whether or not people had used it, and then more broadly, skincare regimes and routines and purchasing habits across the board for cannabis consumers and non-consumers. Now, one little caveat that I want to bring forward is that in our survey, we specifically asked about CBD-based skincare. So today you'll hear on the webinar that I'm referring to it as cannabinoid-based skincare, because in conversations with Purissima, we really want to focus on all of the cannabinoid-based opportunities in skincare, even though our survey specifically spoke to CBD. So Karen, Rob, I don't know if you have anything to add about how Purissima works in the space with minor cannabinoids.
Well, yeah, I would say that Purissima has developed a platform technology using algae fermentation to produce minor cannabinoids and major cannabinoids. And our initial focus is on minor cannabinoids, and these are compounds that plants don't produce very efficiently, so they're in essence inaccessible by consumers. And so we're very interested in looking at the people's willingness to try CBD-based products, but we're also very excited about talking about how other cannabinoids that are produced by these plants can have complementary and even more impressive therapeutic benefit in topical skincare applications.
Well, thank you so much for that clarification. I think that's all really fascinating. You know, as folks know in the industry, there's so much focus on THC because it is the most abundant cannabinoid in most cultivars. CBD obviously got very early recognition, but there's so much more to discover and explore about this amazing cannabis plant, and so many applications that we haven't even begun to discover. So I love the fact that you all are going the scientific route and really looking more deeply into what the plant can provide. And I think we're really going to get into that a little bit more today. So before we start and before we launch our poll, I want to do a little housekeeping. So this is I would say, interactive webinar, meaning that at any time you can post a question in the Q&A. I will see that question. If it's something appropriate to bring up in the middle of the discussion, I will do so. Otherwise, we'll either wait till the end or we may answer the question privately if it's not relevant to this specific topic. But please feel free to put questions. We really love to answer them while we're doing the webinar. If anything comes up on a slide that you have further questions about, please feel free to drop it in. So with that, why don't we launch our poll? All right, so here's the poll. You can go ahead and answer it. We're asking about what type of market you operate in, what part of the industry you're in, and then of course, whether or not you use cannabinoid-based skincare products. All right, so with that, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. And we will get started. All right. So let's first look a little bit at the market opportunity. So I think this is probably not surprising to those folks that work in the cannabis industry, but when we look at CBD products, the most common methods of consumption are via oil, drops, and tincture, with topicals being third, edibles being second. So basically we're seeing non-smoked forms of consumption, most common with CBD, whereas with THC, of course, smoking flower is the most common method of consumption. So given that this is kind of the product form preference of CBD consumers, how does this shape which types of skincare products may have the lowest barrier to entry in the marketplace?
Well, I mean, Amanda, I think that obviously oils are a very easy way into the market via the CBD beauty category. And there exists already a few brands in prestige down to more mass or masstige level that are in oil format. Edibles are extremely accessible in terms of nostalgia, easy to consume. And actually amongst women, which are the highest percentage of new cannabis users, it's one of their first entryway form factors, right? But actually in terms of trends, we're seeing a lot of CBD going into masks and serums and other niche products in the market. So I think that, you know, in terms of formulating with this particular cannabinoid, there are a lot of different opportunities to put it into various form factors, depending on the category growth and trend. But at the end of the day, the opportunity is really showing the efficacy of whatever that form factor is for our consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can imagine that if people are really used to consuming their CBD via oil, drops, and tincture, that having a serum that had CBD in it would be, would be a pretty easy lift, right, for people to go from one to another versus something where people are very used to smoking flower and now here comes a face oil with THC in it. It may be a little bit more of a reach for people that aren't used to consuming cannabis in that manner.
Yeah, and I think it's also like a chicken egg question, which is, you know, the ease of format in terms of formulation may also impact, right, the types of products that are going to the market.
Absolutely, absolutely. And especially when we're talking, as you mentioned, about minor cannabinoids. So, you know, you talked a little bit about the process that you go through in order to extract these cannabinoids that are not abundant in the raw plant. So how does that impact the barrier to entry for people that maybe want to use CBG or CBC or some of these other cannabinoids that have to go through special processes to get enough of it in order to have a therapeutic effect?
Well, I think a couple of points here is one, I think there's a tremendous opportunity to offer a secondary benefit to existing products. So for example, if you're used to a moisturizer and you understand a little bit about the formulation that works best for you, I think it's an opportunity to say, okay, we now have a moisturizer that maybe has some calming properties or resurfacing properties. So I think there's an interesting marketing angle to add an additional feature on existing products. In terms of what we're doing that's going to make it easier to formulate, we're able to produce minor cannabinoids in commercially relevant volumes. And they're easy to formulate in in oils. They dissolve readily in oils. And so we've got a growing portfolio of ingredients that now people can start experimenting with and looking at, okay, maybe CBD plus a minor cannabinoid, CBC, might have better utility than just CBD on its own. And so it's opening up the potential to formulate, I would say, well, first of all, the availability of a wide range of compounds enables you to essentially feature maybe a unique hero ingredient for a particular application, where one cannabinoid may have a more profound effect than another.
That's really, really interesting. And I think it kind of speaks to this next point, which is that, familiarity with CBD and even knowing what the minor cannabinoids are, or even have heard of them before, or have heard of them with utility, really is from the consumer population. And when we look at consumers versus non-consumers, and we had someone ask, how do we differentiate between consumers and non-consumers in this survey? We basically define consumers as people who have consumed cannabis and plan to consume cannabis again. And non-consumers are either people that did it once and it was like, nope, or they've never done it. So that's how we define that in this context. But unsurprisingly, cannabis consumers are more aware of CBD as a skincare ingredient. They're more likely to have tried CBD as a skincare ingredient. So thinking about marketing when it comes to cannabinoid-based skincare, what does it mean? Does that mean that consumers are your target audience, or does that mean that there's this whole unreachable or not yet reached audience that may just have not the education or awareness that CBD or cannabinoid-based skincare exists?
Yeah, so that question is really interesting, right? Because the easiest conversion will be from the cannabis demographic, which is very familiar, right, with these terms and these acronyms. So when we say minors, like what are we talking about? Not a scale, but actually minor cannabinoids. However, obviously the broader market is really where that market opportunity is exponential. And so, 53% of beauty consumers are looking at ingredients now, right? And looking at the ingredients in terms of product effectiveness and efficacy. And so there's actually a really huge opportunity to position cannabinoids, major, minor, what have you, in terms of a hero ingredient within a skincare formulation or topical formulation, or a huge complement, right, to whatever that hero ingredient may be within that skincare formulation as a boost, right? As rounding out that product story, so to speak. So we're looking at, this opportunity, not just within the easily converted demographic, but also educating and driving awareness toward cannabinoids and minor cannabinoids in skincare formulations as a huge, formulation booster in delivering the results that brands and companies are seeking, and also that consumers are also demanding.
Well, that's really interesting, and something that we are going to get to in a few slides is what the consumers and non-consumers view as those hero ingredients. And, I think when people see what they are, they'll understand that that is a story to be told because of what we see in ingredient preferences already. But let's go to skincare routine, because something else that we wanted to look at wasn't just familiarity with CBD as a skincare ingredient or whether people had used it, but are there differences just overall in how consumers and non-consumers approach their skincare? So, to your point, is it just that cannabis consumers are more aware of CBD, or is it there is a difference in the way they're taking care of their skin, or whether they're taking care of their skin that could translate into marketing opportunities? And indeed, we are seeing that cannabis consumers are more likely to have a skincare routine, so 49% to 44%. They're more likely to spend more on skincare. And they're more likely to buy more products. So they're out there, they're looking at what's new, they're trying a bunch of different things. So why do you think this is? I mean, what do you think it is about cannabis consumers that would also lead them to be different in this type of behavior?
That's actually a really good question. I think that cannabis consumers don't need to be convinced of the therapeutic benefit of cannabinoids. I mean, they know from experience that they do something, and in the case of euphoria, I mean, it's unmistakable that's an effect. And so I think they're already convinced. They don't need to be sold really on the power of another hero ingredient that's found in some remote part of the world. They believe that cannabinoids do something, and it's more, I think, the opportunity for marketers is to talk about how these ingredients can, or talk about the efficacy of these ingredients and a clinical benefit, instead of just talking about the fact that we feature CBD as a hero ingredient. And with many brands, in fact, don't just feature CBD as the hero ingredient, but don't talk a lot about the efficacy. And I think that's a big opportunity. And so for cannabis consumers, I think they're already they already understand that there's potential here and are much more willing to invest in trying products that they think might benefit themselves.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think consumers are, from at least what we discovered through our survey, they appear to be a much more sophisticated, obviously open-minded, trendy type of consumer, looking out for probably not just for their own wellness, but willingness to spend on their wellness in general. So it's definitely been very interesting to see these sort of outcomes from our survey, and that we are dealing with a savvy demographic, which then also portends a lot of great marketing opportunities, right, in terms of converting this demographic to more CBD or cannabinoid-based beauty and wellness products, and also just highlights too, right, in terms of the non-consumer market, what is it that it kind of keeps them back a little bit? Is it the price point? Is it just education and awareness? And I think we have to do a little bit more research and study in terms of how to reach this particular demographic.
Well, the point you bring up about wellness is really interesting, right? Because cannabis, of course, is a wellness tool for many, many people. And it's also a medicine for many people that is not covered by insurance. So this idea of being willing to spend or being willing to take a more expensive route to wellness because you believe it's better for you could definitely kind of weave its way into other types of wellness activities, right? So whether people are willing to buy, to workout equipment, or whether they're willing to buy organic food, kind of these extra spends, because we see from the survey that consumers and non-consumers do not significantly differ on income. So it's not that consumers are making a bunch more money than non-consumers. It's the way they're choosing to spend their money, and choosing to spend your money on cannabis for a lot of people is a wellness decision and a wellness expense, as would be choosing to spend money on skincare. So I think that it really does make sense that this is kind of in the same universe for consumers.
Yeah, I mean, from the beauty category and industry standpoint, it's always trying to capture that consumer share of wallet, right? So whether it is their choice to spend more in restaurants than beauty or what have you, and what we've actually seen, and this is somewhat outside the scope of this survey, is that through the last few years of COVID, cosmetics, beauty, wellness is probably one of 2 or 3 only categories across the board that has shown consistent year-over-year spending growth. And this was just actually reported through NPD and McKinsey a couple days ago. So it was really fascinating to see, because although we are speaking specifically to cannabis cannabinoids, these are the same people, right, running around the world that we're all trying to capture that share of wallet. So seeing that this particular category is increasing year over year, regardless of how the pandemic trends have gone, compared to all the other categories like grocery or travel or dining, is really monumental and very optimistic in terms of what we will see in terms of category growth and the potential for really capitalizing and leveraging the efficacy and potential therapeutic benefits of cannabinoids within beauty and wellness.
Well, there's great overlap there, because we're seeing similar trends in cannabis. And even though, people might be buying less expensive products or vacillating between product types based on price, people are committed to cannabis as a wellness tool for themselves, as many people are committed to skincare as a wellness tool for themselves. And so even when we look at discretionary versus non-discretionary spending, people want their needs met around wellness. And so I think, this next slide really hits that point home, because even though we see that consumers consumers have, more frequently have a skincare routine, that they're spending more on skincare, the reasons that people are using skincare products and the products that they're using, there isn't a difference between consumers and non-consumers almost across the board. So consumers and non-consumers report the same top products for the most part. We'll get to that difference there in a minute. They prefer the same ingredients, and they're looking to address the top same needs for skincare, right? Dryness and anti-aging, the top two skincare needs, vitamin E and vitamin C, the top two ingredients, and moisturizer and cleanser, the top two actual products. Now, there's a couple really interesting things in here that I want to ask you about. One is, we talked before about this kind of minor cannabinoid as a hero ingredient booster and what would be kind of the companion piece to that. And something that really struck me with these ingredients is that the top two ingredients are natural, or at least viewed as a natural ingredient by consumers, vitamin E and vitamin C. And so can you talk a little bit about how cannabinoids as an ingredient kind of fit into this viewpoint by consumers about the importance of ingredients being naturally derived?
Yeah, that's a great point, Amanda, because there's really only about 3 cannabinoids that are available from a plant source today. So these are naturally sourced. The remainder of the cannabinoids on the market are synthetically derived. And we know in beauty that there's a very strong preference for clean products, non-synthetic products, products that are sustainably sourced, which actually is becoming more and more of a hot topic. Using algae fermentation, our process, that's a natural process to produce these minor cannabinoids. So that's the first of its kind, in fact, enabling access to these ingredients. So it fits very well, the story of producing cannabinoids using algae fermentation with natural ingredient sourcing. And it's probably a combination of efficacy, but familiarity that also drives consumer interest towards vitamin E and vitamin C, for example, because everybody's been, we've heard about those from when we were kids, eating Flintstone vitamins. In fact, what I think is a really exciting opportunity here is just building on this notion that cannabinoids are not singular in their benefit. I mean, they have different functions, and different functions largely related to the format. So whether it's a gummy or a topical or a vape pen, they have different, they have different durations of onset. And so there's I think an incredible opportunity to view cannabinoids and minor cannabinoids as an overall wellness routine, because also beauty is related to, for example, skin inflammation. Things like this can be triggered by, multiple nights of poor sleep and a lack of rest. And cannabinoids can address all of these things that sometimes have a cascading effect that ultimately ends up in, you're not feeling great about how you look in the mirror in the morning. So I think there's a really incredible marketing opportunity here to build products around overall wellness and well-being, with particular products targeted for particular benefits.
Well, that's a great point. And I think you're right that, people are familiar with these ingredients. And so, going back to the difference between consumers and non-consumers, it's like, how do we make non-consumers just as familiar with, hearing that their face oil has CBG in it and understanding what that means? So do you have any thoughts about how cannabinoid-based skincare companies can put forth that education without it being so necessarily salesy, because a lot of beauty ads, I mean, look, I am a woman in my mid-40s. I feel like 90% of the beauty ads are targeted at me, and they're educating me, but they're educating me about why their product is going to make my skin less dry and make me look not as old and get rid of my fine lines and wrinkles. So how can cannabinoid-based skincare companies educate, especially non-consumers, about the natural ingredients, about the benefits, without it being part of a marketing? Or can you? Or is it that's just how they're going to get the information?
Yeah, I think that's a tricky one. And when you say, cannabinoid skincare companies, Amanda, I think it's also like looking at or positioning these ingredients as a key ingredient and not specifically a cannabinoid ingredient. So if you look at this chart here in terms of, the top skincare products purchased based on ingredients, right? hyaluronic acid, you go and take a poll, like how many people had heard of hyaluronic acid, let's just say, 7 to 10 years ago, right? So there was, these trends emerged because you have a few pioneer kind of early entry players that capitalize on a specific key ingredient. Then, on the other side, the supplier side, right, they start to scale up production of these particular ingredients. So if you look at hyaluronic acid, right, it's very easy and not that expensive to access hyaluronic acid because manufacturers have found a way to meet the demand of companies. So I think there's, there's a variety of factors that kind of come into play and all kind of fit in together for an ingredient to really show that growth. Of course, companies will, run clinicals and do a lot of marketing to prove that their product, which is heroed by hyaluronic, is efficacious for one's skin, right? So what I'm hoping to see in the near future is that cannabinoids will be just one of those ingredients that people are looking to that will play into their formulation very well, right? Just as you look at, pick up any product on the shelf, whether you're at a CVS or at a Sephora or Ulta, right? You'll see the same 10 to 15 hero ingredients showing up and appearing in the Inky over and over again. And I think it's just a matter of, again, a few initial key players finding the information that they need, the clinicals that they need. And that's also on the burden, lies with companies like us to be very science-focused, science-backed with why we think, major minor cannabinoids are important for beauty and wellness products and what they can actually do in order to then gain the faith of those market players to enter the market initially with some of these ingredients and then start that education and awareness drive from there. But it is not immediate. It is not overnight. None of these ingredients just sort of zoomed up overnight. It took years. So, that's what we're all here for and what we're excited to see is that ingredient focus is definitely there from consumers and non-consumers, and skin needs are there from consumers and non-consumers, whether it's dryness or dark, eye circles or acne. Everybody has the same problems. They're just in the market trying to find the best product for their needs. And so it's just a matter of us trying to prove and continue our education drive in terms of what cannabinoids can really do in skin.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's, an onboarding process basically into the mainstream market. And kind of the $1 million question that's been going on since the cannabis industry arose and was born is, what's the product vertical or what's the ingredient that's going to break through into that mainstream market? And I think CBD so far has probably been the most successful. However, we all know the issues with hemp-derived CBD versus, cannabis. It's the same thing, but hemp-derived CBD versus cannabis-derived CBD and what that means for the regulatory market. And, the CBD product that I buy in the dispensary has a much harder time getting to market than the CBD product that I'm buying at the drugstore. But where's the testing more rigorous? And so, I think skincare, for a lot of reasons, it's non-intoxicating. It's a topical application. There isn't a huge risk of children getting a hold of it and all of the things we see with other types of cannabis products. For this to be the vertical that gets really adopted into the mainstream, beyond just having CBD and hemp lotion in the drugstore, but really starting to see the large beauty players, the folks that are all about the hyaluronic acid right now, starting to talk about the minors and the major cannabinoids. And then to your point, that would spur innovation on manufacturing. So how do we create this ingredient in, at scale, because now everyone's interested in it and everyone has to use it. And then it kind of gets taken up by the mainstream beauty industry. But I really appreciate what you're saying, which is that the science underneath it has to be sound, or else it's just going to be another marketing tool and it's just going to be another sound bite and isn't going to have anything underneath it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And, if you think about it, it's so interesting to see that it's its own category, like CBD beauty, right? You walk into a Sephora, there's a CBD end cap, right? But it's not like you walk into a store and there's a retinol shelf or a vitamin C wall or something, right? So it's more about integrating these ingredients as just a really darn good skincare ingredient that can create amazing products for the desired results that consumers and non-consumers are seeking. So when I look at it, from an industry standpoint, it's interesting that CBD, and maybe, it's also part of the regulations are all about it. It was very trendy, and the trends went up and then it kind of went down, and now it's sort of plateauing. There really is a need for just enveloping the ingredients into just a broader base of tools that formulators can reach into within their formulating toolbox to say, this would be incredible for psoriasis, this would be incredible for acne, and really showing that these products can work. And, CBD beauty, I think, has had a very kind of hockey stick type of, and then back down again type of trend. But I think there are other factors that went into it, which is not as much study, not as much research, not as much investment into the education as what you see with all these other ingredients that you see on this chart. I mean, open up anybody's social media platform and you'll see a lot of influencer content, on what makes retinol work, right? What exactly does retinol do? Why does vitamin C work, et cetera. So I don't know if that level of investment was made across all of the initial pioneer brands, CBD brands in beauty initially. There are a few select ones that have really made it their focus to do so. But, out of, 1,800 plus products in across the beauty database of CBD type of products, how many of them really are pushing that sort of education? And that's what's needed.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk in a few more slides about where consumers and non-consumers get their beauty information. And I think that is going to give us a little bit of an explanation as to why we've seen a bit of a gap in kind of influencer education around cannabis, even CBD. But one thing we're seeing from this slide is that whether you're a consumer or a non-consumer, people are sharing the same issues. Everyone's reporting you're using for the same thing and that they're using the same products, with one exception that I just want to point to before we move on. So, consumers and non-consumers are interested in the top 4 products are the same, except consumers rate exfoliator as their 5th most common product. And for non-consumers, it's night treatment. So we talked before about kind of why cannabis consumers might have more of a skincare routine in general. Do you have any thoughts about why they may look to exfoliators more commonly where non-consumers are into the night treatments?
Yeah, I mean, well, if you have a broader routine, right, exfoliator, which is considered more of a niche product, would be part of your routine. So that definitely resonates. Demographic in terms of age, and we don't have that specific age bracketed out right here, but we do know in general that the consumers tend to be of a younger demographic versus the older demographic, who are a little bit more reserved about cannabis use. So that kind of plays out into our theory here, where the night treatment seems to be more preferred for the older demographic, and the younger demographic who tend to be more of a cannabis consumer and have a more of a larger or in-depth skincare routine would be using a niche product such as exfoliators.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the age plays a huge role here. Younger folks are like, I don't need night treatment yet. And older folks are like, I'm not going to exfoliate. All my skin's going to come off. So I can definitely see some product differentials there. So we're going to get into a little bit about the profile of who a cannabinoid based beauty customer is or user is. But first, I want to get the results of our poll. So Noah, if you want to throw up the results of the poll, and we can take a look. All right. So it looks like most people here are in the CBD market. So that's really interesting. Second being THC, followed by minor cannabinoids, 40% minor cannabinoids, and industrial hemp. So really interesting because, hemp, again, we talk about hemp-derived cannabinoids, such a much easier way to market than something that's coming out of the technically cannabis plant. Looking at where people are involved in the industry, retail is the highest, followed by processing, and then and then cultivation, and then tied for ancillary products and ancillary services. And then finally, have you ever used a skincare product that includes cannabinoids? 91% say yes. Now, there's definitely selection bias here because you all are attending a webinar about CBD and cannabinoid-based beauty products. But And you're all in the industry. And I'm not going to guess you're all consumers, but I'm sure a good number of you are. But that's really interesting. So almost everyone that responded, which was 55 people who responded, 50 of them have used a cannabinoid-based skincare product. And I would put myself in that group as well. All right, so we're going to move on now to talking a bit about who are the folks that might be most likely to adopt a product like this. So there is something on this chart that surprised me a whole lot. So let me go first what didn't surprise me, and then we can talk about the surprising part. So unsurprisingly, cannabis consumers are more interested and willing to try a cannabinoid-based beauty product. This should not come as a surprise. This interest held across age groups. So for each age group, consumers were much more likely than non-consumers to want to try a product like this. But what did surprise me was the gender breakdown, because for both consumers and non-consumers, men were more likely than women to say that they were somewhat or very interested in trying a cannabinoid skincare product. So of course, I'm going to totally gender stereotype here. And the assumption is that women would have a higher interest than men. But I have a few ideas about what's going on here, but I'd love to hear from you what you think is going on here.
Yeah, from my perspective, Amanda, I mean, we know that there are more male consumers than female consumers. Although the female demographic is the fastest growing of cannabinoid users, and maybe it's partly due to this idea that because a consumer already knows that cannabinoids have a benefit, they don't need to be sold as much of a marketing story about a new product, because admittedly, a lot of the products don't have a very good marketing story. They're just featuring the hero ingredient. But if people are convinced that, that vitamin E, for example, has a particular benefit, then they don't need to really hear that story. If they know that it has a benefit, they're more focused on what the product is, what the price point is, and whether their friends use it, that type of thing. So perhaps that has something to do with it, and it's just the familiarity of cannabinoids and the fact that they have a biological response in the male community.
Interesting. Karen, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I was really surprised. I would have bet for sure that those numbers would be very different, definitely flipped, and definitely not such a high percentage of male consumers being so interested in trying the cannabis or cannabinoid skincare product. I also, my theory, and this is, just kind of me shooting in the dark here, but I feel like females are very familiar in general in terms of the options regarding skincare products, right? So their universe of potential skincare options is very, very broad to a typical male customer demographic out there. So I think for the participants in this particular survey, it was probably, the males who were like, well, I don't really, I probably use a bar of soap or a very simplified skincare regime compared to female participants. But when you say, hey, look, how about CBD skincare or cannabinoid-based skincare, that sort of little jump was probably not a huge leap for them. So that's sort of my theory. They don't know what that universe of skincare category could be out there.
Right. They're like, there's weed in it. Okay.
Yeah, I'm right.
And that, and that was kind of my theory. I think that, I think you put something in a product that a certain group really gravitates towards and, likes to explore and experiment with, then they're going to be more likely to try it, even if that particular product isn't something they would usually try. You put chocolate on anything and I'll probably eat it. Even if I don't like what's underneath, like I'm like, oh, there's chocolate on it, I'll try it. So I could understand why, even if you're not a skincare person, saying, well, if it has this thing I really like in it, then maybe I will adopt it. I think the other thing that's going on, to your point, Rob, is that women are more routined in their skincare. Like they already have a routine, they already have products they like, they have products they trust. And so to that point, do you think it might even be harder to convert female cannabis consumers over to cannabinoid-based skincare than men if they already have a routine? If they're like, look, I've been using X, Y, and Z for years, I love it, it works. Why am I going to go to something else? I mean, do you think that women actually may be a harder sell there?
They probably, they might be, but I think that, I mean, we've said all along that we're going to see cannabinoids in every form of consumer product at some point in time. I mean, if we haven't already, if they're not already available on the market. So I think there's an opportunity. We see really big brands hesitant to enter the space just because of the lack of regulatory, clarity in terms of, for example, use in food and beverage. But once that becomes clear, I think these are going to be ingredients that just about every major CPG company formulates with. So again, I'll go back to the opportunity to say, okay, I have this huge following of my moisturizer. Why not upscale that product offering a bit and have a version that also has a calming feature to it, which is enabled by XYZ cannabinoid. So I think, yeah, it may be difficult to break into that demographic. But an easier route to that may be to just start fortifying the products that they already use with the brands that they trust.
Well, see, now to that point, and this is like a little bit off topic because it's about flower, but I think it really also illustrates that point. So we recently had this dispensary report that we put out, and we found that consumers would rather buy a strain that they didn't know from a brand they trusted than buy a strain they knew from a brand that they didn't know. And so exactly the same thing to your point, right? If I'm using X skincare products and I love them and I've been using them forever, and now they have a new one that has a new ingredient I've never tried before, I'm much more likely to stay within that brand probably and try that new product than I am to go to a similar ingredient to a brand that I had never tried before. So I think that is a huge opportunity, as you said, for beauty companies that have loyal followings, that have people that love their products, especially if they have a lot of cannabis consumers in their consumer base, to bring along a cannabinoid-based product as just an addendum, a add-on to what they're already offering. And that would be a great way to get to these kind of loyal female consumers who have a skincare routine and have really stuck with it for some time with the same brand.
Yeah.
Now, something else we see on here that I just want to point out, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes, is that for non-consumers, those that are more interested in trying cannabinoid-based skincare products are people that already spend more money on skincare. So I think that there is this assumption that cannabinoid-based skincare is expensive. So can you talk a little bit maybe about, is it going to be less expensive as things scale, and maybe how it compares with some of these other ingredients that people really seem to like?
Well,
go ahead, Karen.
I'll take it from the beauty standpoint, and Rob can take it from the manufacturing standpoint. I think when CBD beauty first emerged, CBD was very expensive. So obviously the price points for the new players to the market at that time were at a more premium level. Obviously, if you were to enter the CBD beauty market now, the price of CBD has declined significantly. And so sourcing CBD for a product formulation now is nowhere nearly as expensive as it used to be. But I think the access and the manufacturing is key to keeping the costs and the cost low and the supply high. So I can let Rob take that part.
Great. Rob?
Well, manufacturing scale certainly is an important aspect, but I think a more important aspect is understanding what the right concentration is in a formulation. And so you see CBD brands struggling to gain market share. And so you see people going to the ultimate extremes, just packing their product full of CBD, selling it on the basis of CBD content, when in fact, again, there's not the science to justify why somebody needs that concentration and why that concentration is so much better than a lower concentration. So I think the science needs to catch up to it. And what I think we'll discover is that cannabinoids, when formulated properly, can be used at reasonable levels where their cost doesn't make these products prohibitively expensive. I mean, look at CBD is very inexpensive today, largely due to the fact that there's a huge oversupply. It's cheaper than THC, even though THC there's far more volume of THC sold on the market, illicit and illicit, versus CBD. Minor cannabinoids, they will come down in cost as scale is developed. But it's really about understanding how much you need in your formulation to provide the efficacy. And the efficacy is, at the end of the day, really the only thing that matters in terms of getting repeat customers, right? And so the science needs to catch up to the enthusiasm and support product formulators in their messaging about why they have a certain concentration in their formula.
Yeah, really interesting. I mean, obviously we see something very similar in the THC space. It's just like throw more THC at it, throw more THC at it, when really we should be looking at the minimum effective dose, right? Like what's the smallest amount we can put in there and get the effect we want? That's where you want to start. And so I do see, you know, these kind of very high concentrated CBD products, and I'm thinking, what's the science behind why that much is needed? So really interesting. All right, let's talk a little bit about opinions and recommendations about CBD and where people are sourcing their information, because we talked before about, you know, beauty, and really a lot of it is being spread by influencer awareness and influencer advertising, which of course poses a specific problem for the cannabis space, whether you're CBD or cannabis or even hemp, really. But first, I want to look at positive experiences and recommendations, because something here we see is a difference between consumers and non-consumers. Consumers don't really care if they've gotten a positive recommendation for CBD. You know, they're like, someone tells me it's good, someone tells me it's bad, I'm making up my own mind. You know, I'm really not listening to that. Whereas can be expected, non-consumers are much more swayed by having a positive recommendation from somebody around CBD, or having a positive experience, or someone tells them they had a positive experience. So how can the skincare industry and the cannabinoid-based beauty product industry kind of work together to help non-consumers either educate them or give them positive recommendations, or kind of that really seems to be a trigger point for a lot of non-consumers getting into the market, is that someone tells them it worked for them. And of course, testimonials and things. But before you answer that, let me add the other caveat here, which is the how people source information. So when we look at how people are sourcing information, social media influencers and bloggers are right up there. And for cannabis companies, social media promotion and marketing is mostly not allowed. So given that a recommendation, especially for non-consumers, is so important, at the same time, it's so difficult to utilize social media marketing for cannabis and CBD companies, what do we do? How do we get around that?
Well, you know, it reminds me of some statistics that I looked at a couple of years ago, where the majority of people that were buying CBD products were buying it on the basis of a friends and family recommendation. But then if you dove a little bit deeper and started asking those friends and family if they could tell the difference between CBD isolate and CBD distillate and, you know, different sources, they didn't know. So they were giving advice without really understanding, you know, from a formulation perspective, you know, what's even in the product. I think it goes back to trying to create communities of people where you've got ambassadors that believe in the product and are willing to share that with friends and family and people in their network. I mean, this isn't a new concept, but I think it's one that people, you know, just given the challenges. I mean, it's challenging for us to post anything on Facebook, for example, because of the censorship around cannabinoids. So I think we're going to have to rely on building communities of people that, you know, where we're helping to educate people that are prolific in sharing, you know, their knowledge about what these compounds do. I see no shortage of people that are willing to talk about what they think is going on. And those are the people that we should be educating with the correct information, so that they can be spreading, you know, factual information around to their networks, and hopefully these people will be willing to try these products.
Well, I remember when I was growing up, there was Avon calling, right? So you had these kind of like door-to-door Mary Kay that would come and do demonstrations of the products in someone's home. And I know that in the cannabis space, because there's such a difficulty in marketing and getting the word out through usual channels, that there have been some of those around sexual health products for seniors, around consumption. So do you think that there's an opportunity for more of like a peer-to-peer kind of in-person network of people to educate around the benefits of cannabinoid-based skincare?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's also the stigma, right, that still halos over cannabinoid-based products. So, I get the question all the time as to whether CBD or any sort of cannabinoid on skin could make somebody high. And that is it's just very telling in terms of more authoritative voices and people in those credentialed in leadership positions being able to speak out very informatively and with a lot of science-backed data as to what it is these molecules actually do or don't do, like get you high, right? Looking at here, media, obviously media was really into quote unquote CBD beauty a few years ago, but getting them back on board into what the science is really saying. And again, the burden really does lie on the companies to provide the science so that the media, it takes up the attention of media, having retailers, right? Whether they be dispensaries looking at potentially offering more CBD type of products as well. And then also medical professionals, right? Of course, medical professionals are, you only have a small selection of them really believing in the potential of cannabinoids giving them the faith in terms of recommendations to their patients, but getting these sort of medical communities on board so that they become a voice in a scientific based voice for the demographics out there. And then, when it comes to social media influencers and bloggers, this overlaps, right? There are a lot of medical professionals that are social media influencers and bloggers. And finding that platform for them will be really, really important. Until that stigma is gone, I think a lot of these platforms will continue to censor. But, Meta just accepted a bunch of sexual wellness words, right? There was a big campaign on behalf of a few key sexual wellness companies to lobby for the easing of some of these censorship rules or algorithms on their platforms. And I think this is something that, we in the industry should continue to lobby for in order to enable the channels of communication out there. So there's a lot of work to do, but I remain very optimistic in the fact that the science will prove the voice of reason at the end, and hopefully then eliminate some of the stigma kind of haloing over everything.
Well, if there's any product vertical that has the best chance of kind of breaking through that stigma and bringing this conversation mainstream, I think it's skincare. I mean, we used to talk about topicals as being the gateway drug for seniors into cannabis because it was something that it was very easy for them to adopt. They didn't have to smoke it. It didn't get them high. It was a product format they were very used to using, and it was effective and it was helping them. And so I think, for people that are non-consumers, they don't want intoxication. They don't want anything to show up on a drug test. They don't want to smoke anything, but they have the same skincare needs as everybody else. So I think that it is almost like a lowest hanging fruit for us to try to get mainstream companies, social media platforms to start accepting this as a wellness product and all of the conversations that go around with it. I mean, the idea that, you can promote alcohol on social media, but yet you can't talk about the science behind a wellness product is an issue. And so, this could be a really good way to start that conversation, because there is a medical focus and it isn't about just having fun, right? And what people assume that cannabis use is. So I'm really excited. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity to see that mainstreaming and to see those larger beauty companies pick this up as a hero ingredient or a complementary ingredient and not have the segregated CBD shelf in the beauty store, but have it integrated into all other products. So I'm very hopeful. But then again, I've been working in cannabis for 20 years, so all you have is hope, right? I mean,
I'm very hopeful, and topicals are very easy. There's really no placebo effect, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, right? You see it or you don't. Right. So either that inflammation disappears or it doesn't, either that acne reduces or it doesn't. So there's less of a maybe, or, it could have been due to a variety, there are other factors, obviously, that helps your skin improve, right? So maybe you've had 5 nights of amazing sleep along with your routine of CBD beauty, and that's why your skin has cleared up or what have you, or is less inflamed. But from a formulation all the way through to the marketing standpoint, the before befores and afters will really be very telling at the end of the day, and could be a huge conversion point for a lot of these brands.
Oh, absolutely. And, just the further investigation about the entire plant and all of the benefits the plant can bring. The intoxicating piece was kind of the first to market because that's what people are interested in, but there's just so much more to discover. And as the research, barriers become lifted and we start to see more access to cannabis for research purposes, I'm really excited to see where that research and development goes. So before we wrap up, we're almost to the end. This has been so amazing. I'm going to go over just some few key takeaways. If folks are like, what should I have gotten out of that hour that I just listened to? This is what you should get out of it. So one, cannabis consumers are more aware and open to CBD skincare. This shouldn't surprise anybody. They're already using cannabis. They're more familiar with CBD as an ingredient. Medical consumers may be a better target than recreational consumers. And we say this because when we look at the top forms that people consume CBD in, they are things like topicals, oils, tinctures, and they tend to be medical consumers. You definitely see more medical consumers consuming CBD than self-identified recreational consumers. So they're folks that are already using these types of products. Interest in CBD skincare is higher among men. So again, talking about that women may already have a regimented skincare routine that they're not necessarily looking to change. Men may not have a skincare routine, but might be willing to try a product because it has something they really like in it, like cannabis. But overall, a very interesting opportunity that doesn't really exist with other types of skincare products. Additionally, cannabis consumers are more engaged with the skincare space. So overall, cannabis consumers are more likely to have skincare routines. They're more likely to spend more money on their skincare products, and they're more likely to buy more skincare products. Consumers and non-consumers prefer the same products, and they use skincare for the same reasons. So even though consumers are more likely to know about CBD, they're more likely to try CBD products, they're more likely to have a skincare routine and to spend more money on skincare, everyone's looking to solve the same issues, and everyone's using the same products with the same ingredients in order to solve those issues, which really simplifies us a little bit when we're looking at the consumer landscape. And then finally, non-consumers may hold a mistaken notion about the cost of CBD skincare. So we see for non-consumers, it's really those who are already spending a lot of money on skincare that are more likely to try CBD. Those that are not spending as much are rejecting it. This could be because of ideas about how much that costs. And as we've mentioned, as we get mainstream adoption, as we see scaling up happening in manufacturing, that price is going to come down. And then that could be part of the education that happens around the accessibility of cannabinoid-based skincare. So Rob and Karen, I want to give you all the last word to talk anything you want to say about what you're working on, what's coming up for you, or any last thoughts you have about what we've discussed today.
Well, I would just finish by saying that we are on a mission to bring a wide range of naturally produced cannabinoids with a primary focus on minor cannabinoids initially to the market so that formulators can start making these more available to consumers. So consumers should start looking for and asking about where cannabinoids come from, how they're produced, and marketers and brand owners should also start leaning into that messaging as well, which is now enabled by our platform being commercial. And we are leaning very heavily into elucidating more about the science of how these compounds work and what types of applications they should be tested in, and bringing that data to consumers to help their purchasing decisions. So you'll be seeing a lot more of that coming from Purissima in the months to come.
Oh, fantastic. I can't wait to learn more. Karen, any last thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'm just really excited to be part of, and I'll take a couple of buzzwords and plug them, but in high efficacy biotech, blue biotech, that's what we're players in now. So we're really excited to be part of this new emerging space. And we've been doing a lot of work, obviously, on what cannabinoid can do in skincare or topical formulations. But of course, what's next, right? So we're already onto, and as I mentioned, it's easy to see what the difference is before and afters with skincare and topicals as to how cannabinoids can be efficacious or not. But what if you ingest it? So edibles, as you saw on the initial chart that you displayed, is one of the top formats. And what do cannabinoids do in edibles? And that's our next study. So, you know, wellness is a $1.5 trillion industry. Female wellness is $40+ billion. So female wellness is a key focus of ours in terms of how cannabinoids can really impact female wellness, which has historically been underserved as a category in general. So we are doing a period relief study now that we're happy to announce. And for those of you who may be interested in learning more, I'll be posting more about it on our LinkedIn page. But we're going to be investigating the potential properties and benefits that cannabinoids, namely CBC, cannabichromene, and CBDV, both minors, can do in relieving menstrual pains and PMS. So please stay tuned. Hopefully that's something else that we can talk about in the future. But for anybody who's interested in learning about our study, please come to our LinkedIn page.
Well, fantastic. First of all, thank you for taking on that field, because no, it is definitely not addressed enough. I would love to be a part of your study if you're looking for volunteers, and I'll definitely read up more about it. I really encourage folks to check out the work that Purissima is doing. I mean, it's really talking about bringing the science to the products, you know, so much because of prohibition that we know or think we know about cannabis is really based on incomplete research. It's based on research on animals and being done in the lab in a petri dish and not really understanding how it impacts people or people's experiences. And so bringing that kind of into the public sphere around beauty and wellness is very, very much appreciated. And I really love the approach that both of you take with being science first. And I really can't wait to see what else you bring to us in the marketplace. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. This has been just a wonderful conversation about, like I said, really not talked about product vertical very often in the cannabis space. But I also, like I said, think it's probably one of our best chances to push forward in terms of mainstreaming, marketing, product adoption, and science, because a lot of the things that prevent us from studying cannabis aren't really the case when it comes to this type of product. So I think we have a lot of potential and opportunity here. So again, thank you everyone for joining. I hope you enjoyed our webinar today. I'm Dr. Amanda Ryman, Chief Knowledge Officer for New Frontier Data, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for joining.